What is up, everybody? My name is Raymond Summerlin. This is the Sharp Angles podcast from sharpfootballanalysis.com. And I'm excited today to be joined by a guy I've known for a long time, a guy I used to work with over in the wonderful days over at NBC Sports and RotoWorld, the one, the only, Lord Don't Lose, Lawrence Jackson. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man, and even better to be, hopping on this here podcast with you, Ray. It's been a minute, so I'm glad
In a
we
little
get
bit,
to
yeah.
I'm glad we get to chop it up again in this format on your platform now.
On my platform. We it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned it has been a minute since we've talked. I was just sending you text messages during the Olympics about track and field. As soon as you started tweeting about track and field, and I knew there was somebody else I could send text messages to about track and field. I go, he doesn't even know what he's done now because I there's nobody else for me to talk with about. Like, you're gonna get random texts about Diamond League races in in a
Yeah,
few
well, see,
in a few
the
weeks.
Diamond League races is when you know it's real. That's when you know. So, or next year when it's not the Olympics, and we just talking
Exactly.
about the nationals and the world championships and stuff
Worlds.
like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. When I'm sending you random texts about a thin Mo and if she's gonna be able to come back and get back to form, then we're gonna have to you're gonna
Yeah.
know that it's real. But I mean, I love track and field. It seems like you love track and field too. I don't think we've ever even had a conversation about it, but just
Which
based
is
on your
which is
timeline.
wild, yeah.
Yeah. But like that was amazing, right? We're coming off an Olympics. And you know what's funny? The last time I think I was on this podcast, I talked about how much I was looking forward to track and field. And then coming off this Olympics, and this fits because you're there with NBC. Coming off this Olympics, that's one of the more amazing track and fields I've seen.
Yeah.
And Sydney McLaughlin Lavroni is just unbelievable. Just she's I don't even know what to say about. I don't know if I can put into words for people that don't follow track and field how much better she is than everybody else. It's wild the level that she's on right now.
Yeah, I've now at this point run out of words to say about her because I started the words way back when she was 16 years old, making an Olympic team. So it's no shock to see what she's doing now. The fact that she could clear 400 meters jumping over hurdles in 50 seconds, almost under 50 seconds,
So
is
wild.
it's I it's gotta be the greatest accomplishment going right now in any sport outside of, maybe that kid Quincy Wilson running a
Yeah, yeah.
44-20-16. Like those two right there are neck and neck. But Sydney, man, she is one of a kind. We've never seen nothing like it. And she just getting going, man. She really
Yeah.
just getting going. So yeah, man, she's the GOAT already. And she ain't but 24, 25 years old.
Something like that. Yeah, and I think I saw she split 47-7-1 in the 4x4, which
When
is
when
it was
when
like,
sh when she got that baton, dog, they put her I like them putting her on the second leg because instead of having the suspense, like
yeah, yeah,
knowing you gonna get smoked by her on the anchor leg, they put her at
yeah,
second to just be like, all right, we gonna put this away right now. And that's
yeah.
exactly what they did. Like you got a good first leg from Shamir Little. I think she split low 49. But when she gave it to Sydney, that was all she wrote, man.
We were done. And it was funny because that split was, I think it was like a second faster than Femke Bol, who Femke Bol is one of the best ever done it. It's like Femke Bol's unbelievable in her own right. And it was like a second faster. I was like, I don't even know what we're doing here. This is wild. But we're not here to talk about track. But when I get the opportunity to talk about track, I'm going to talk about track. One other thing we have to talk about, though, is I've been following your Twitter now, and you're apparently a pickleball influencer now, which I'm very interested. I've played pickleball 3 or 4 times. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't think it was the greatest thing I've ever done, but I'm willing to be persuaded by you, Lawrence, that I should get into pickleball.
I'll tell you what, man. And the good thing about that pickleball tournament, I was just that it was Drew Brees' pickleball tournament.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I got to talk to him about it a lot and how he got started playing it too. And it's really a sport that everybody could play. It's kind of on an even playing field. It's not like as if if I play against my daughter in basketball, I'm gonna win that just based on sheer physical I got the upper hand in physicality, but in pickleball, it ain't about that. You got to have the hand-eye coordination. Also, too, you play it in doubles a lot of the times too, right? So when
Yeah.
you're in the same team, y'all really got to be communicating. You got to have that hand-eye coordination. And when I was at that pickleball tournament, man, I seen people ages 10 and ages 80 all playing it, so it's good in that way. I only played it for the first time out there. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going because everybody be golfing now. I ain't
Yeah.
gonna do that. I'm not golfing, man. Like for
You're
one,
not gonna be joining me on the golf course? Me
no.
and Diddy Carter on the golf course, you're not
Nah,
out there with us?
everybody can have that golf stuff, man. One reason why is because I don't feel like being ridiculously competitive in something else and something just making me
Yeah.
mad. Two, it's gonna cost too much. Because if I get the
It costs a
golfing,
lot.
when I get the golfing, I'm gonna have to have the Jordan shoes,
Yeah.
all the fresh gear, and that's gonna run me out my money. So I'll let everybody else have the golf. Pickleball is where it's at.
I did like my one time playing doubles pickleball because with my wingspan, I didn't really even have to move. Like, it was just me
There you
standing
go.
in the middle. It just all I gotta do is just lean. So I was fan of doubles. The singles, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
small
was fan
course
of
though.
doubles. Yeah, they're small, man. That was the one thing I started when I started playing, I started taking full swings and I go, "Oh no, that's not what we're about here. We're doing slices and top spin. That's our
It
life here in
it's
pickleball."
uh it's it's like you can either call it a big ping pong or a small tennis. That's
I
what.
like big ping pong.
Yeah. I one day hope to build now a pickleball court in my backyard. That's in the
I
works.
like it.
We're talking about it. That's in the works right now.
You're getting quotes. You're
Yeah,
getting
a
quotes.
little something.
So I'm so excited to be joined by Lawrence. Like I said, I've known Lawrence for a while. We worked together over at NBC Sports. Over at NBC Sports, by the way, you can find him. He's gotten involved in a ton of stuff over there. Fantasy football happy hours on Wednesdays with Matthew Berry. Sunday fantasy football preview again on Sundays with Matthew Berry. Make sure you go and check all that out. Also, by the way, the website that I work for now, Sharp Football Analysis, wants you to know we have a wonderful Sharp Football draft kit going right now. There's a great series from Rich Rebar this week looking at the stats that matter for every fantasy football position. That's just one of, he's been doing a series every single week for going on 2 months now. You have Rich Rebar's rankings, Rich Rebar's fantasy tiers, everything from Rich Rebar over there. You can bundle our draft kit with our season long content. So you get all of Rich Rebar's worksheets for the entire season. That's his comprehensive preview of every single game of the NFL season, both for fantasy and betting. You can bundle those two together over at sharpfootballanalysis.com or sharp.football. Make sure you go and check that out. And one of the things as I was going through a series that Rich did, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, as he was talking about a lot of the trends that we see in scoring. And I had been thinking about some teams, and we'll talk about a few of them that I thought were going to surprise us offensively. And when you really dug into those those trends that he was looking at, both in kind of how often teams convert yardage into touchdowns, how often teams are scoring touchdowns in the red zone, all of that kind of stuff. It really highlighted some of those teams I was already interested in, and then a few more that maybe I wasn't interested in. In fact, you brought one of them up in when I asked you what teams you wanted to talk about. And so I'm going to be really interested to talk about the Panthers here in a second. But that series really got me thinking. I think it's an interesting topic to think about. Okay, what offenses are we going to surprise? Because in fantasy football, we think a lot about what happened last year. And to be fair, how many fantasy points somebody scores in one year is a decent indication of what's going to happen the next year. Obviously, there are massive changes, but if you just kind of plot that out, you see that that's something that that is really predictive, kind of moving forward. But we also need to look at these offenses and the ones that are going to change and why they might change. And that's kind of the topic idea. And the one that got me thinking, first of all, just right off the top, Lawrence, the one that got me thinking about this is I've been pretty high on the Cardinals offense all offseason. I've been drafting a lot of Cardinals, a lot of Kyler Murray, a lot of James Conner. Now his price has gone up from where it was, but a ton of James Conner. And I was high on the Cardinals because I don't think people realize, first of all, how good of a job Drew Petzing did last year, even before Kyler Murray came back, and also what that offense was once Kyler Murray was back. And remember, that's not even the fully 100% healthy version of Kyler Murray that we would expect to see in week one this year. From week 10 on, over 8 full games, the Cardinals were 10th in yards per play last year. They were 9th in points per drive with Kyler Murray. That is a top third offense with Kyler Murray without much of a passing attack all year long. Pat Singh coordinated a running game that was fourth in yards per carry, third in EPA per rush. They could run the ball even without a quarterback. Kyler Murray showed up, and now then they were able to just move the offense as a whole. They now have Marvin Harrison Jr. They finally have that alpha wide receiver they haven't had since DeAndre Hopkins left. I look at everything about the Cardinals offensively, and then I look at their defense and think, oh, that's probably still going to be bad. So they are probably going to have to throw the ball a little bit. And I look at everything with that Cardinals team, and I'm in. I'm 100% in on the Cardinals this year. And I don't know, looking at fantasy prices, if we've really if that's really been priced in, at least for Kyler Murray and James Conner. What do you think?
Yeah, Kyler Murray is my quarterback 5 coming into this season. I
Oh
so I
wow,
so,
yeah,
so
well
I
ahead.
expect them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I expect them to drastically improve. And we talk about the guys. We got Kyler Murray, then you got Marvin Harrison Jr., who I've got him right inside my top 12 fantasy wide receivers. That's who we're going to look towards to lead that offense. But like you said, you mentioned James Conner, right? His price probably is going to go up even more now because Trey Benson, he got a little bit of run. And he didn't do anything to wow us. He wasn't, he didn't get out there and he wasn't an awful player in preseason week 1, but he didn't break that big run, how that one play like Dontavian Wicks just affects the
Montavian Wicks.
AD.
I was going to say it. Yeah, there you go.
That
That's the
just
name.
affects the ADP
Yep.
right there. Like Trey Benson wasn't able because like literally Trey Benson controlled James Conner's ADP in preseason week 1. So now we're starting to ask ourselves, why does James Conner the past few years, we always overlook him, and then he ends up getting double-digit touchdowns. He's always the lead back in the backfield. So you got Kyler Murray, you got Marvin Harrison, then you got the often overlooked James Conner. And I'll tell you what, man, the offense as a whole will be good. It's always as good as your guy, your work guys, and that's gonna be Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. Those two players are better than what a lot of people think. Michael Wilson started a lot of games last year as a rookie. He'll be back to start alongside Marvin Harrison he'll be a nice number 2 option. Then you got Greg Dortch, who we've put him in our fantasy lineups as well
Yeah.
at given times, right? So
Let the Dortch loose, man. If
yeah,
Greg
yeah,
Dortch is getting targets, he's scoring fantasy points. That's all I know about Greg Dortch.
yeah, and I think that and then you got Paris Johnson, the young offensive tackle that you got there. So all of that is to the advantage of Kyler Murray, and that's why I have him as my quarterback 5 this year. Add to the fact that he's another year removed from that torn ACL, so I'm looking forward to seeing more running from Kyler Murray, and then just more of what he does, throwing off platform, getting out of the pocket and making those plays. That's where we accumulate all those fantasy points. So I'm really like, if I'm not getting a Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, those type of guys, that next tier is led by Kyler Murray, and I would love to have him as my top fantasy quarterback. In fact, Kyler Murray was a guy that led you to fantasy championships last year on the back end of the season. So yeah, I'm all in on that Cardinals offense.
And to your point, and I think that this is really an important thing to think about, is the last time he was attached to like a really true number one wide receiver with DeAndre Hopkins, he was the quarterback 4 in points per game in 2020 and then parts of 2021. He was the quarterback 4 over that span. They didn't play together that whole time, and so you look at that. We know what Kyler Murray can be when he's attached to someone like that. We have high hopes that Marvin Harrison is that player. I have at least a few concerns with where Marvin Harrison is going in drafts, just simply based on how much higher is his ceiling from where he's being drafted. You know, Trey McBride is there. What is Trey McBride's target share going to do to Marvin Harrison's target
I
share?
didn't even
I
I
think
didn't
there are
even
some
mention
questions.
him. I forgot to mention
There
this
you go.
guy, and that's my tight end 1. I didn't even
There you
mention
go.
that guy.
Yeah, and so So they're like, how many targets are there to go around? There's some concerns there with all that stuff. But if I ended up in a best ball team where I ended up with Harrison, McBride, Murray, which is very doable, then I'm feeling great. Like I'm in a great place, and I think that investing in this Cardinals. To your point about James Conner, the thing about James Conner, you just have to resign yourself to the fact that James Conner is going to miss 4 games. That's going to happen. You just have to resign yourself to the fact that he's not going to be there for 4 to 5 games. It is what it is. And then just take the games that he is there and know that he's going to get you numbers, especially in this offense, especially based on what we saw last year. And especially because he was, just good last year. I think that when people were drafting Trey Benson a lot higher than they are now in June, a lot of that was, well, they drafted Trey Benson, he's going to come and take over this role. But that's kind of overlooking the fact, and this is kind of a similar situation with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. This is overlooking the fact that this isn't a rookie back coming in to a veteran back that hasn't been very good. James
Right.
Conner was very good last
Right.
year.
Right.
Kyron Williams was very good last year. Now they didn't just have a ton of volume; they were good with that volume, and that
Mhm.
makes this a little bit different. And it's why we've seen now that spread between Benson and Conner. There was a time in June where I think they were like 3 running backs apart in ADP or something like that, and we've seen that spread happen. So I'm with you. I'm all in on the Cardinals. I'm all in on Kyler Murray, and I'm really really excited about it. One of the teams I mentioned, this team at the top, when I was looking at Rich's that kind of looking at regression trends, especially in team scoring, a team that showed up over and over and over and over and over again, and also a team that you brought up when I was saying, hey, who do you want to talk about? Is the Carolina Panthers.
Yes,
And
sir.
I have really turned the corner on them after reading Rich's series on regression. I've really become interested in investing in several parts of this offense. I still don't know what to do with the running backs, but other than that, I'm feeling really interested in this Panthers offense. What particularly has you on them? I assume you think they're going to improve this year.
Oh yeah, 100%. You just talk about some of the simple things like coming into last season. Even though Adam Thielen did his thing as he was a top 10 fantasy receiver through 10, 11 weeks last season, but you don't want to he wasn't brought there to do that. It ended up being that way because of the slow development of the other receivers. They fixed that this season, bringing in Deontay Johnson, who is incredible in the intermediate part of the field with the catch and run. Then you get the big body receiver Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina. That's your big body down the field guy. He'll get you 50-50 catch guy that, turns into 70-30 when it's him. Also, he can run away from you. Xavier Leggett, probably the fastest dude on their offense, if not they whole team. So just that alone so now you have Adam Thielen back in his slot role, working as presumably the number 3 receiver, which is where you want him, 2 or 3, depending on what happens with Leggett. But we know Deontay Johnson is the number 1, and that's something Bryce Young didn't have last year. What he also didn't have was a good offensive line. They bring in Robert Hunt from Miami. Matter of fact, Hunt was one of the guys who got hurt last year for Miami, and that kind of decimated the Dolphins line going down the stretch. So you make some adjustments on the offensive line. You've made adjustments at the receiver position. You draft a young tight end in Jatavian Sanders. We'll see how he comes along. You draft a running back in Jonathan Brooks, who they say, his ACL injury is coming along at a nice pace. So you really got something to work with now. Like the kid had nothing. And then when it's all said and done, Ray, look, you can't get no worse than what they had going on.
That's the
They
one.
can't get
That's the
no
one.
worse than,
Yeah.
like, I don't last year preseason, we all felt great about Bryce Young. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I mean, he was the first pick in the draft. One season goes by, just one season, and now everyone's like, is this the worst quarterback ever? No, he was in a not so advantageous situation, and now it's better. I'm not saying these dudes is going to the NFC Championship, right? But this Panthers offense is gonna compete, and they gonna be better than what you think. Bryce Young said it himself. with Dave Canales in there, also too, we just saw Dave Canales help Baker Mayfield have a resurgence and get himself paid, right? Bryce Young said this new offense is allowing him to be himself. So that's more of what we saw at Alabama, right? And so I expect I don't think you could find a better wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team than Deontay Johnson. If you're in like if you drafting 0 running back, then yes, you can. But I'm talking about if you draft like a regular draft, get a couple of running backs, couple of receivers, maybe a quarterback. Deontay Johnson as your wide receiver 3, when you see what he did with Adam Thielen last year, Bryce Young, those those numbers, it could be Deontay Johnson this season.
Yeah, I've completely turned the corner on Deontay Johnson, where I was kind of a little bit out on him because of just this offense, and I wasn't super interested in investing in this offense. And like you said, I think that point about it can't get worse. I maybe it could, but it very likely is not going to get
Yeah,
worse.
nah, it
And I
could.
think that
It
it
could.
could. Everything could always get
But it
worse.
won't.
Welcome to my just negativity over here. Everything can get, but I don't think it will. And I think the stat that stood out to me from that series from Rich is the Panthers scored 10.3 fewer touchdowns than expected based on their yardage total last year. Only one team was worse last year. We're actually going to talk about that team here in a second. Even without any improvement, just based on that, you would expect us to see more touchdowns moving forward. You would expect them to score more touchdowns per yard kind of moving forward. And like you mentioned, they did make improvements. They made improvements to the offensive line. They brought in Deontay Johnson, who didn't have maybe his best season last year, but he was still 12th in ESPN's open score. He's a guy that gets open, which is something that Bryce Young really needs. They didn't really have a ton of that last year. He's a guy that's going to get open. He's, like you said, a guy who can work the intermediate areas of the field. And with Deontay Johnson, like you said, you can build around that with Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette, or maybe Jonathan Mingo. Maybe we get Jonathan Mingo coming back and serving in that kind of that big receiver role. Maybe he takes a step forward in season 2 as well. And then, like you said, with Dave Canales, you mentioned Baker Mayfield. The year before that, it was Geno Smith. Like, he was the quarterbacks coach, I'm pretty sure, in Seattle with Geno Smith in 2022.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Yep.
we've seen this happen. So I've turned the corner on the Panthers. I still don't know if I'm investing in anybody other than Deontay Johnson, because that
Yeah,
backfield situation,
me either. Like
like,
I
it's
I
tough.
did take Bryce Young as my third quarterback in a
Yeah, that's
super
fine.
in a super flex dynasty startup after taking Lamar and Jaden Daniels, right? So I took that.
Now those are the two. Yeah.
Right. But on my receivers are my third receiver is Deontay Johnson on that team. So it's like the other than that, but yeah, I'm with you. The running backs are a little scary, a little shaky. Look, double round flyers, so to speak, if you want to go that route. But yeah, Deontay Johnson, the way to go.
With Jonathan Brooks, it's pretty clear from everything we're reading that Brooks is not going to be the lead back until the second half of the season, which, if you're in best ball, that's a different kind of equation, right? But if you're in redraft, you're in a managed league, and you have to just have him on your bench through the bye weeks, then that there are going to be a lot of teams that draft Jonathan Brooks that cut him before he gives them meaningful numbers. Even if he
Yeah.
comes back in week 10, week 11, week 12, and is the lead back, that makes it tough to invest in that. With Bryce Young, I mean, he did run a little bit in college. We didn't see that last year. If he starts running a little bit more, then maybe he gets to that equation, but it's tough for him to just get there with passing. And so yeah, there are questions, but I mean, Deontay, I'm in now. I'm back in on Deontay Johnson. Our one of our good friends here, Curtis Hirsch, he and I drafted a best ball team, and he suggested Deontay Johnson to me. It's probably, I guess it was probably a month ago now, and I was like, really? And now I have to apologize to him because I've turned the corner. You were right, Curtis. I'm in on Deontay Johnson. The only team worse than the Panthers in expected touchdown per yard last year was actually the New York Jets, which is another team we need to talk about here. I mean, legit, the league worst quarterback play over the last two
Oh
seasons.
man.
Like, that's not even hyperbole. That's just true. There have been 38 qualified quarterbacks over the last two seasons. Zach Wilson is 37th among that group in EPA per play. He has the third highest off target rate over that time. he had Garrett Wilson. Like, he had one of the best receivers in the league. They've got Brees Hall. I mean, if you're making an argument for the Jets to be a lot better on offense this year, it seems pretty clear what the argument we're making, right?
Yeah, it's Aaron Rodgers.
That's
And
it. Yeah.
like you said, Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle,
Mike White.
uh, who no, it was Simeon. Or no, so it was
We
another quarterback.
we got
What
Simeon in there at some point. I think
whatever the
so. I think he
case,
was in there
they
as well.
all Jets quarterbacks combined for 11 touchdown passes and 15 interceptions last season. Whew.
Yeah.
Boy,
See,
that's
I was
hard.
going back even further than last season. I was going back to the year before that. I believe it was Wilson, Mike White, and Joe Flacco. Were those? I think those were
Yeah,
the three,
yeah,
and I think the three of them like together were at the bottom of EPA per play of
yeah.
completion rate over expected. It's been bad for 2 years in a row. It's been so bad.
Yeah, and I think I know, a lot of people feel a certain way about Aaron Rodgers, but when we talking about what's gonna happen on the actual field, this offense is gonna get a lot better. And I think everybody knows that. Even if you say Aaron Rodgers' last full season was mid, there's a lot of quarterbacks that would like to have that type of season. And if he has that type of season, this is like the Jets were 7-10 as a team. They still had a top five defense despite the offense coming off the field all the time, right? So you bring in Aaron Rodgers, right? You actually make moves. You actually make moves along the offensive line. You bring in Tyron Smith. You bring in Morgan Moses, who was starting over there for the Baltimore Ravens. You draft Olu Fashanu. Like, that's major for this team, who it seemed like they ain't ever care about the offensive line. Now, this too, you'll get guys who should be, fully healthy on that offensive line, like Elijah Vera Tucker. That was a big part of so all of those guys, and missing some of those guys, it just makes you be like, damn, Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson did all of this with that. It's crazy. Like, we saw how Brees Hall just turned up in the fantasy playoffs last season, and he ended the fantasy playoffs with a 40 plus point fantasy game in the snow. So all that being said, that just makes this offense more intriguing. So I expect the Jets to compete. I expect the Patriots to be left in the dust in that division. It's gonna be a three. When you look at what the Buffalo Bills lost, what the Jets and Dolphins have gained, it might finally be even now. It might not just be Buffalo so far ahead anymore. You know what I'm saying? So, but as far as I mean, you bring in Mike Williams too. But the thing with
Yes.
him is he got to stay healthy. We know when
Mhm.
he's healthy, he making plays down the field in the red zone. So, I expect the Jets to do something this season.
I'm glad you brought up Mike Williams. I actually was just looking up a stat on him because I think that we are overlooking how big of an impact he could have if he is right. Like, you're right. He has to get healthy. He's an older receiver. He's coming off another, serious injury, right? And so we're gonna have to see. It doesn't seem like they activated him off the pup list, but it seemed like what I was reading about it from the coach, maybe it's gonna be a little bit slow kind of into the season. But when you look at what Mike Williams has done when on the field, it has been great over the last over among players at least 100 targets over the last 3 seasons. Williams is 19th in yards per route run and 14th in yards per target. You'll take that from your number 2 wide receiver on your team. Warren Sharp actually had a great stat about Mike Williams. On targets to Mike Williams over the last 3 years, Justin Herbert has averaged 9.1 yards per attempt with a 4.3 touchdown to interception ratio. On targets that didn't go to Mike Williams, Herbert averaged 7.7 yards per attempt and a 2.1 touchdown to interception ratio. Herbert was much better throwing to Mike Williams. Mike Williams, if he's healthy, and that's a huge if, is going to be a massive kind of secondary receiver for this team and give Garrett Wilson, who I mean, I think is one of the top young receivers in the league is going to give him, that kind of that second guy. And yeah, I mean, everything for the Jets here, it just comes down to Aaron Rodgers. He's an older wide receiver. I mean, an older quarterback coming off of a serious injury.
Hey, the
We don't
only
know
older
what's going to
wide
happen.
receiver at 40 years old that did well was Jerry Rice.
That's right.
He dropped
Jerry Rice.
1,200 yards at age 40.
His
Not
career
Aaron
is
Rodgers.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, not Aaron Rodgers. His career is wild. Just go to Pro Football Reference and just look up Jerry Rice's career. It's the other
numbers is
player that's kind of
crazy.
like that is Randy Moss. As I look at Randy Moss's career, there's just seasons in there that I forgot happened.
Like the
like
Raiders.
that's like the Raiders that I just forget that has happened. Yeah, that's some fun. That's some off-season Pro Football Reference dives for everybody. Um, I need you to tell me if I'm crazy about this next team, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. And we've been talking positive, positive, positive here. I'm a little bit concerned about the Dallas Cowboys offense this year. Now, I want to be clear about this. If Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are healthy, this offense is going to be at least fine. Like, I feel pretty good about this offense being top half of the league. If those two guys are healthy, both of them are very good. But this Cowboys offense hasn't just been that. This Cowboys offense has been elite for several years in a row now. Over the last 3 years, the Cowboys are second in points per drive, they're fifth in yards per play, they're sixth in success rate. This has been one of the top elite offenses in the NFL over the last 3 years. Last year, they were first in points per drive. They have been elite, 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 elite. When we look at, there are a couple things though that have me a little worried we're going to see a step back, and then also a little concerned. This offense is now so thin. It's so reliant on Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb being healthy that if something happens to one of those guys, then we're in real trouble. The first thing that I'm looking at are these regression trends. I'm going to keep bringing them up from Rich. That's really kind of been the impetus for this idea for this episode. The Cowboys scored on 54.5% of their drives last season. Only 6 teams have had a higher rate since the year 2000. Every single one of them had a decrease in scoring rate the next year. 4 of those 6 teams had a decrease of double-digit touchdowns in the next season. They scored at a rate that was unsustainable last year. And actually, when I bring up points per drive, they were first in points per drive last year. You look at their yards per play, and that was lower down. I think it was still elite. It was still very good, but it was like 6th or 7th. And that kind of shows you some of that, maybe a little bit of scoring luck they had last year. And then, as I said, the offense is just very thin. If something happens to CeeDee Lamb, or if CeeDee Lamb gets upset because Jerry Jones says that they have no urgency to get his contract done, which I don't know what you're doing, Jerry. You should have got both those contracts done like a year ago. So I don't know what you're talking about. But if he gets upset about that, right, and we don't have CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I like Jake Ferguson. Okay, I don't think that we think he's a like particularly elite talent. I know people have hopes with Jalen Tolbert, with Jalen Brooks, Brandon Cooks. I mean, Brandon Cooks been on the downturn now for a couple years in a row. I know he scored a bunch of touchdowns last year, but you look at everything else and it wasn't great. This offense is just very, very thin, and it's operating on much thinner margins than I think we would expect, given how good it's been over the last 3 years.
Yeah, so you pretty much said what the concerns would be, and the things we have to see out of the Cowboys offense. I put out a list the other day of my top quarterback and receiver stacks in fantasy football, and I actually had Dak and CD as the number one stack. But the offense as a whole, right? Like I said earlier with the Cardinals, it's going to be as good as I hate to say your worst players on the offense, but it's gonna be good as your most unproven players can make it. Guys like Jalen Tolbert, uh, what can Rico Dowdle do? Zeke not as explosive as he used to be. S- he'll still be effective, definitely in the short yardage and near the goal line when they need that, and that's big because they didn't get that from Tony Pollard last season, right? But like guys like Jalen Tolbert, they drafted a tackle in the first round, Tyler Guyton, who will replace Tyron Smith. Like how quickly can you get ready to go?
Yeah.
So it's those guys who are in important positions. Jake Ferguson, are you gonna just be like a top 12 fantasy tight end, or are you really gonna get it going? Those are the type of guys those are the guys we're looking at to say, hey, you follow Dak and CD Lamb's lead because they're gonna do what they do, right? Even uh in that playoff loss against Green Bay, we saw Dak Prescott and CD Lamb get off to a horrible start together, right? But they ended up getting their numbers as the game went on. It ended up being a high scoring game. So it doesn't really matter what happens. Those two are going to get their numbers, but how often they could, get down and put the ball in the end zone will remain to be seen because you got some young guys that need to step up. Again, Jalen Tolbert, this is year 3 for him. So it's gotta happen. You know what I'm saying? Like they're depending on him. They got Cavante Turpin, but it doesn't seem like they see him as a every down slot player. You know what I'm saying? So it's about those unproven guys. Can they step up? And that's where we'll know how far this Dallas offense could go. But first, you got to get your top 2 players signed. You got to get them signed.
Just like the price tag just goes up every day. What are they doing? It doesn't make any sense. I'm glad you said, yeah, like we throw around like terms like bad, and I always think about I can't even remember his name, that Celtics player now who said he was closer to LeBron than we
Oh,
ever are to
Brian
him.
Scalabrine.
Scalabrini, there you go, Scalabrini. Yeah, I mean, Cavante Turbin is closer to Justin Jefferson than we are to him.
Oh,
That is definitely for
right,
sure.
right. That's why you ain't ever gonna hear me talking about some players suck. Like, whoa,
Exactly.
because if they
No,
have
they're
to
in the
line
NFL.
up against
They're
us,
good.
like
Yeah,
we're getting all hurt. We're all gonna get hurt
yeah.
here. You know what I mean?
No, I'm getting blown up. Don't worry, I'm getting blown up by Brock Hoffman, the currently projected starting center for the Dallas
Yeah.
Cowboys. I'm gonna be 10 yards downfield before I even know what happened. So I'm not gonna say anything about it. But you mentioned their offensive line, and their offensive line is a lot like the rest of I mean, their team, honestly, is like you look over there and you say Zach Martin. Yeah, like that guy is really good. You could see
But
how you
right, but
feel
we
about
know
Terrence
that though. We
Steele.
know that about him.
Exactly. Exactly, and then Terrence Steele and, Tyler Smith, maybe, right? But then we got 2 holes on the offense that we don't know about, right? And so it's just like it's a lot in auction drafts, very often I will spend a lot of money early and then wait. And it's the Cowboys are built that way. The Cowboys are built stars and I don't want to say scrubs because again, these dudes would murder me on the football field. But it's a very like stars and scrubs kind of approach to building a team. And that could work out. If everybody stays healthy, like you're fine. But like you get one injury and it just I'm concerned that things are gonna fall apart. The other point of that though is that other than CD Lamb, who are we investing in though, really in this offense? Who are you having to pay a high price for?
So
That's about
that,
it.
that
And so it
yeah,
makes it
that
it takes a lot of that risk away,
that dynasty league I told you about, I
Yeah.
took Jalen Tolbert in like the 20th out of the 24th round. Cause it's like, hey, let's just, you know what I'm saying? Let's just see what happened right here, you know. But in
Yeah.
regular redraft fantasy leagues, ain't nobody taking Jalen Tolbert right now. Now, if he go out there and go 6 for 131 and a touchdown week 1, he's gonna get picked up on the waiver wire, and that's when he'll
Yeah.
drop that 2 for 20. You know, and it could be like that, or we just gotta see with
Yeah.
them, man. Some of the players gotta step up pretty much.
Yeah. No, and that's what we need to see. But that does make interesting, like in best ball leagues, because you can get Dak later. Dak's like the quarterback 9, I think, in underdog right now. You can get him later, and you can even if you didn't end up with CD, if you didn't end up with that pick, you can stack him with Ferguson and Cooks and Tolbert or Brooks, or you can get creative there with Rico Dowdle. And I can't do it with Zeke, man. Maybe Zeke gets just 11 touchdowns because they they create a lot of scoring opportunities, but I can't with Zeke right now. But yeah, like there are opportunities there with this offense. There
Say he
there are
can't.
opportunities there with this up. I just can't, man. It's there have been too
I, I-
many
I'll tell I'll
training
tell
camp
you
videos
what.
I've
I'll
seen.
tell you what about the Cowboys at the running back position. If they picked up Dalvin Cook right now, that's
There you
the
go.
Cowboys running back I would draft. That's who I would draft
Dalv
out of all them Cowboy. But right now, because I think Zeke going ahead of Rico Dowdle. So I'll lay
he's still a
back a
little bit,
little,
yeah.
I'll lay back a little bit and take Rico instead. Cause they ain't gonna let my boy Deuce Vaughn spin. That's who they need to let really play. That's who they need to let play. But whatever. If the Cowboys sign Dalvin Cook right now, That's the cap. But hey, what do I know? Jerry know. Jerry knows. He know. I don't know.
Yeah. That's right. He's not going to pay his players, but he knows best. We're all going to be so upset in week 4 when it's Royce Freeman. When Royce Freeman has 7 touchdowns in the first 4 weeks, it's just going to be nothing. It's going to be nothing but
He
anger.
had a couple games with the Rams, so hey, you never know. You never
It's just
know.
going to be nothing but anger from everybody. All right, one more team I want to talk about, and this is a team you brought up, which is it's interesting to me, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. And I actually don't know. I don't know which direction you're going with them. I assume you're kind of buying in on this offense, or we just buying into Anthony Richardson. What's going on here with the Colts?
Well, I'll tell you this: Anthony Richardson is my top quarterback in fantasy this season, and I'm willing to take him over Lamar. And you know me,
Ooh,
if it's
yeah,
somebody I'm willing to, you know,
hold on. Let me tell the people that that Lawrence loves Lamar, and so this is what's what.
Lamar helped me get my career started here. He
So
made
I
me
didn't want to
look
say I
smart.
didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could tell that one time you got a DM from him, and it was like you sent me a message like it was Christmas morning. It's the greatest thing that. To be fair, you're right. Like that was something to
No,
be excited about, but it was crazy.
I never got a DM from Lamar.
Yeah,
We just follow each other on Twitter.
oh, followed each
You know
other.
what I'm
That was
saying?
it. Yeah, we followed
So
each
I'm
other.
the only fantasy person that he follow if he ever want to play fantasy.
And it was almost as if the time that Aaron Jones, when he was still at UTEP, followed me, and I was like, "This is the greatest day of my life," because I've loved Aaron Jones for years and years and years. It was the happiest I've ever been. But yeah, no, if you have someone ahead of Lamar, then yeah, you're feeling some kind of way about Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. So that I'll start with that right there. So and now, Ray, we get to see Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor together. That's gonna be a nightmare for opposing defenses. Look at what Zach Moss was able to do last season. And if you look at Jonathan Taylor, he scored a rushing touchdown in his last 5 games. See, people will look at the totality of it and kind of be like, Jonathan, would you be shocked if Jonathan Taylor finished as the top running back in fantasy? He's not my top running back. I would say my top guys are CMC and Brees Hall, but we would not be shocked if he get back to that 2021 form where he was getting some MVP talk. So now you get a chance for these two to play together. You drafted a couple of linemen in on day 2 to give you some depth there. You draft AD Mitchell out of Texas, who by the way was playing in that slot in preseason week 1 because you just had the injury to Josh Downs. I don't know if that went over people's head, but they didn't use their regular slot backup, Anthony Gould, the rookie out of Oregon State. AD Mitchell was playing in that slot. So that's something to keep an eye on if Josh Downs' absence, creeps into the regular season. Speaking of Josh Downs, him and Anthony Richardson started to build a little rapport before we lost Anthony Richardson. Um, Josh Downs got 18.5% of Anthony Richardson's targets last season. So they had something going last year, those two. So you like to see him come back sooner rather than later. Michael Pittman had a career year last season, albeit most of it was with Gardner Minshew, but he did have some success with Anthony Richardson early as well. So I think they added enough on that offense to be the surprise, kind of like how we were surprised by the Texans last season.
It's all the thing about this offense is that if Richardson's healthy, and that is one of the, he's got to stay healthy. That's really important. We saw him get hurt twice last year in a very short period of time. So he's got to stay healthy. But if he stays healthy, the floor for this offense is, it's pretty good. I believe in Shane Steichen. I mean, he was able to have that offense working well last year, despite the injury to Richardson, despite, you know, some upheaval with in the running back room, like you mentioned, with using Zach Moss instead of Jonathan Taylor for some of the year. But the real thing that's going to take this offense to the next level is if we see Richardson have that development as a passer. We know what his profile was coming out of college. We know the accuracy issues that he had. We need him to really take that step forward for this offense to become like a top, 10 offense, top 5 offense. But even if it doesn't, like from fantasy, to your point, I mean, Richardson was a great fantasy asset last year, even just with his rushing upside. I mean, that game that he got hurt, I believe it was against the Texans. He scored something like 18 fantasy points before the end of the second quarter. Like we know what he can be from a fantasy perspective, and he does have that quarterback one overall fantasy upside because of that rushing ability. And this offense also is going to have a pretty high floor when he's healthy because of what he's going to be able to do. And then if he can stack that, because they do have options there with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs and AD Mitchell, and Alex Pierce is getting at least some love during training camp, and they have what, 7 tight ends on the roster or something like that. We don't know which one's going to play, but whichever one plays seems to catch passes there with the. It's going to happen one day for Mo Alley Cox. It's the fantasy breakout is going to be there one day. But they have all these weapons that if it does come together, yeah, I mean the the sky's there. And ultimately with the Colts, and my thing with this offense is I think as long as Richardson's healthy, the floor is going to be good. And if the floor is good for him, that's great. The one thing you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, and you're right. If he finishes the overall running back one, I don't think anybody would really bat an eye. The one thing with Taylor is we've seen in Buffalo and we've seen in Philadelphia with Shane Steichen in Philadelphia what happens to running back scoring opportunities if the quarterback is used around the goal line. We've
Right.
seen it with James Cook. We saw it with DeAndre Swift last year. And that is my concern with Jonathan Taylor. It's not concerning enough for me to have him outside like my top 7 or 8 running backs. But if you're having a concern about Jonathan Taylor, that's the one. Is Richardson going to steal a lot of those kind of around the goal line, touches? And if he does, what's Taylor's real touchdown upside? I don't know the answer to those questions. And I guess that's your one concern with Taylor.
Yeah, for Anthony Richardson, he's gonna get double digit rushing touchdowns. And I'll tell you what, right? Anthony Richardson's, it sound crazy. Well, not to me, but his passing acumen is why I have him as quarterback one, right? Because I already know you mentioned his last game against the Texans where he had the 2 rushing touchdowns. So I already know what he could do there. His first game as an NFL quarterback, he was 24-37 and 237 yards. So if he has those games more often than not, and you add his rushing, that's why I got. So in his very first NFL game, he was quarterback 4 on the week, compared to CJ Stroud, who was quarterback 22, and Bryce Young was. So all these guys was their first game. This guy's this guy's a top 5 quarterback off the rip. Then he had another game against the Rams, right, where the completion percentage wasn't high. He was 11 of 25 that game, but they came from behind. He got him in overtime, 11 of 25, right? Just think of those numbers. But it was the way he completed those passes and the plays he was making. That was week 4. He was QB2, completing 11 of 25 passes, dog. So it's like, man, if he could do that and still finish as a QB2 on a week, I gotta have this guy. This is a guy who could run an 80-yard touchdown from the quarterback position. There's like 3 guys that could actually do that. Like, we know a lot of guys could run, but Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, they ain't running 85 yards without getting walked down. Anthony Richardson is faster than most of the dudes on the field when he's playing. And so, yeah, that's why I have Jonathan Taylor as RB5 or 6, because it's going to be hard for him to be number 1, because when you get to that goal line, it's either Richardson or Taylor. That's the problem the defense is going to have. So I would say this. I know quarterback, running back stacks aren't a thing, but I would say if you got an Anthony Richardson and a Jonathan Taylor, or a Jalen Hurts and a Saquon Barkley, those are 2 type of, stacks that because you want to leave with something. Like that little Denzel clip,
Yeah.
I'm leaving with something. Like, you don't want to just leave.
I'm for around the way. I'm for around
I'm
the
from
way.
I'm from around the way, baby. I'm leaving with some rushing touchdowns here. you know. So I got to leave me with
It,
got to leave with some. So if it could work, Lamar and Derrick Henry to lesser extent because we the Ravens don't use Lamar as a runner at the goal line. They'll give
yeah.
it to the running back. But for Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, it's like, there you go, man.
That's actually one of the things about Derrick Henry, and I brought this up. The thing about Derrick Henry, because you do have those worries about Jonathan Taylor, you got those worries about Saquon Barkley, James Cook, we brought him up. But to your point, Lamar's not used that way around the end zone. That does give him a little we kind of probably wish he was, because if he I mean, Lamar's already my quarterback one this year. I've talked about it a lot, why I think that is, why I think the Ravens are going to have to throw more this year, drop back more, which is going to lead to more rushing points for him as well. So I've laid all that out. I think Lamar is my favorite quarterback pick right now. But he doesn't have those around the goal line, and that's where Derrick Henry can really thrive. We
Oh
saw what Gus
yeah.
Edwards did last year, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's always a good point to make about because we think about rushing quarterbacks as like this one group, but they're not this one group, right? Like it is, they do things in different ways. Like Caleb Williams could end up being a lot more in that kind of Josh Allen spectrum, where it's going to be a lot of touchdowns. He's going to use him around the goal line and stuff like that. He was used around the goal line at USC, whereas Jaden Daniels could be more in that kind of that more of that Lamar spectrum, where we're going to see him get a bunch of yards, but maybe not use it. And so you
That
have to
that's
think about.
that's a good comparison, which is
Yeah,
fine for Jaden Daniels. That's cool. We
I'm in.
we
Yeah,
we
I'm all in on Jaden Daniels. Yeah,
Me and Barry was talking about him yesterday, and he was like, if you could pencil in 5 or 6 rushing touchdowns, like that's cool. We'll take that with 900 rushing yards. We'll take that.
we'll take that. We'll take that for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, so I was going to bring up the Commanders later. I'm in on that offense too. Jaden Daniels is good, man.
Oh,
And say what you will about
yeah.
Cliff Kingsbury. Say what you will about Cliff Kingsbury, but the Cardinals offense was at least fine with him. And the running game was quietly, I don't think we expected that, him coming out of, college at A&M and Tech, but the running game in Arizona was quietly okay. They got Brian Robinson. We'll see what Austin Eckler kind of looks like moving forward.
Watch how better
It,
Brian Robinson looked this year with that
I
quarterback.
Yeah, I'm in. Like I think I'm in on that offense for sure. I'm in on Jahan Dotson, Penn State legend. I'm glad this is now our second Penn State legend. You got Olu Fashanu in here
Yeah.
earlier. We got Jahan Dotson, Penn State legend. So yeah, I'm a little in on the Commanders. All right. That's about it for us. That's about all the time we've got. Remember to go and check out Lawrence at Lord Don't Lose on Twitter, Fantasy Football Happy Hour, Sunday Fantasy Preview on Peacock, NBC Sports, RotoWorld. Make sure you go and check all that out. Make sure you check us out. If you've gotten this far, you like the content, make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching this, whether that's on your podcast of choice, over at YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Just search Sharp Football on YouTube. You'll find our channel. Make sure you subscribe there. Remember, our fantasy football draft kit, powered by the one, the only Rich Rebar, is available at sharpfootballanalysis.com or sharp.football. Make sure you go and check that out. And we'll be back really soon to talk to you.